Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street, and Iota video for you guys today. IOTA on the exchange. Again, one of my favorite projects on the channel, and also one I've been holding for a few years now. I'm doing this video really, one, I haven't done an Iota video for, I think a few weeks ago now. Time has flown, but I wanted to do a response to someone's comment in relation to the Iota price point and why would it rise if Iota, or the token of Iota, is not necessarily used as a gas fee, right? So a lot of blockchain networks out there utilize the utility of their token to pay for gas, or users would pay to use it for gas, whether that's transferring it to other chains or buying something like an NFT, for example. There's a multitude of reasons why you would use those tokens to utilize the gas fee protocol. But we're going to be talking about Iota in the form of its tangle system. I'm not going into massive detail about Iota because we've done loads of intro videos before. I will leave links to those at the end of this one if this is a new project to you or something you've never heard of before, specifically if you're new to the channel. But on that note, don't forget, if you are new, to smash that subscribe button if you enjoy the content here. And don't forget to hit that like button as well. Massively appreciated. So loads of different topics and discussions we always talk about on the channel. Let us know if there's anything you want us to cover, and we will do our best to do so. I say we, I mean me. So Iota, here we go. Now, predominantly, the Iota system is regarded as like a feeless system. I'm not sure if that's fully 100% accurate. I think there's a very, very, very minimal cost association. We're talking about 0.0000. I don't know how many zeros there are. There's a 1 there somewhere. And basically, the ideology behind Tangle, or what they call the director cyclic graph, which is basically essentially this kind of evolution of blockchain, if you like. I always call it an evolution. It's not actually an evolution. It's just another part of blockchain's ability. And in previous videos, I always try to explain this in the sense that if you could imagine everyone in the world and everything that we use that's based on the internet now, and even in the future, so even now you can talk about smartphones, obviously you can talk about smart cameras, lights, switches, you name it. And at the moment, this is very much protocol on Wi-Fi, using geotagging, for example, or some encryption elements to be able to pass that message across from IoT products, Internet of Things products, or services to talk to each other. However, blockchain can now be added as a layer to validate and process that, and conjoin really that ability of transaction as well. So we'll talk about that in a second, a bit more detail. I've always talked about transactions not always being finance related, i.e. me sending you money and vice versa, a transaction. But the wording of that is literally, as I've said many times, transfer of an action. It could be anything. Can you imagine, like on the screen here, imagine all these little dots here, just as a prime example, are devices or applications, or indeed even hardware. We'll talk about drones in a minute as one of these options. And they all need to talk to each other simultaneously. And then everyone's got, say, 10, 20, 30 devices each to their own. Or they're going into things like a driverless car in the future that's going to be powered with wireless charging capabilities, or the ability for you to turn up to the car with biometric facial recognition. That is a transfer in action. Validating that, processing that, allowing you in, taking you on your journey, realizing that you haven't booked a hotel yet, but because of your behavioral algorithm, it knows what hotel you would like, therefore it books it for you. And all these things are being done in the background with you out touching anything. And that's where we talk about the multitude, the magnitude, the multiplication of transactions on a simultaneous second by second basis. When we talk about transactions per second, it's not just about money. It's anything and everything. So when we talk about, there's never going to be one chain, guys, that wins this, right? This race. But what you're going to see is pockets of regions or countries around the world utilizing a mainframe. Iota is very popular in the EU right now, going through the European Blockchain Commission's phase program of trying to utilize it as a framework to build digital wallets, digital identities, the structure basically, for majority, if not all, the European Union country states. So as I said, regions around the world will utilize their own, and they need to talk to each other. So obviously, in terms of interoperability, that's important. But as I said, cross-border payments, whatever it might be, needs this kind of interaction, this engagement. Okay, so for this to work, and this is where I was talking about gas fees. Okay, forget gas fees with Iota. There's loads of different things. We're talking about the data authentication, for example, transaction fees, in the sense that they don't actually require the fees, but what they do allow is users to validate two other transactions, for example, to have the transaction itself confirmed. And this is essentially in the feeless model. Now I'm going to talk about those two kind of transactional perspectives shortly in a second. You got things like smart contracts on there, of course, which is the ability to confirm and validate something. Could be documentation. In trade finance, we talked about multitude of times the magnitude, the implication of digitalizing trade documentation and allowing the processing capability of supply chain management things to really accelerate is phenomenal. And then you got things like, I guess, like crowdfunding or raising of awareness, for example, tokenization, of course, real world assets. And, these are familiar terminologies that you see across the board in a multitude of blockchains, right? It's not just Iota. But the capability of Iota means that it can handle all of these different things as well as reward mechanisms. So when we talk about those like two transactions, as it were, in terms of validating, that's where the consensus mechanism comes in, and particularly for smart contracts as well. It's the processing feature that's the exciting part when we talk about the features of the tangle system within Iota, or the direct acyclic graph that we've talked about so many times. So in a sense, it is a DLT. I always, as I said, kind of call it an evolution of blockchain just because of that structure mechanism. I always talk about that web perspective, right? The branching out. We talked about just a second ago with that demonstration here. Think of this as a web, but not like a spider web in a 2D fashion, but something that's 4-dimensional, maybe even 5-dimensional, that can just go to A to Z instantly and take control of this mechanism. So when validating, let's say, the two transactions together simultaneously with two different devices or whatever it might be, that process needs to ensure that it complies with the rules, the legislation behind smart contract, behind what Iota delivers as a platform. But also where something isn't confirmed yet, Tangle would be able to validate that in an extreme speed, and for an extremely, extremely low cost, or a feeless cost. Okay, so when we talked about the gas fees, or someone's comment about how are we expecting the Iota price to go up if it's not needed for gas fees, there's so many other things it's needed for. In example, that particular opportunity is the validation of a transaction. So there's a really interesting mechanism here, and I wanted to kind of bring the aspect of scalability into the conversation, because not because there's a word on the screen just then, but when we talk about scalability, we're talking about think about how many devices are already connected to the World Wide Web. Okay, in our houses right now, we've got a Wi-Fi router, but then we've got consoles, we've got smartphones, we've got potentially washing machines, dishwashers, you name it, maybe 4 or 5 handsets in a household, who knows, tablets, whatever, smart bulbs, security cameras. That needs massive scale, because when the technology really takes on with blockchain, this is why I get excited about the future. I'm excited now, but people talk about, why isn't the price point going, and blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, the frameworks aren't fully regulated. The legislation is still not applicable in most countries worldwide, but the infrastructures are being built, if not already ready to be built or there to be used. In this instance, Iota, majority of this, certainly with the frameworks recently of 2.0, etc., and the Shimmer more recently, or the assembly token. I think obviously one of those got trashed recently, but the point being here is that the scalability is really important, so that when we look at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, yes, of course they can still evolve and adapt the blockchain itself, but the ideology behind it is that it's ready to go and ready for an infrastructure to hold millions, if not billions, of people simultaneously worldwide. So again, what really, I'll leave a link to this. It's quite an interesting breakdown of Iota, actually, of Investopedia. But I want to talk about this. I'm a drone pilot, so it's very familiar to me. I've had a career that has spanned through artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, blockchain, of course, in the crypto world. I've also had a few years of experience in the IoT industry and telecoms. So when we're talking about connectivity, we can loop in the fact that we've got fantastic fiber rolling out majority of the country here in the UK and across the world. So the speed opportunity, the bandwidth is there. We got 5G connectivity, we got 6G on the horizon. Yeah, I think even in Japan they're doing 7G at the moment, or trialing it at least. Then we got the mechanism of Starlink. So we've got GPS satellite opportunity of internet as well in remote areas. So there's a whole network there. Then we've got AI to build the data algorithm. In this instance, I'm going to use this as a prime example. Look at this. So farmers are now using drones, which can then seed and harvest automatically. It can spray, unfortunately, pesticides in most instances, but it has a reduction in pesticides and water because of how accurate it can be. You can see there's a picture here of loads of them going up and down fields. Meaning the tractors aren't having to do it. I've seen 5G powered tractors, guys. It's quite incredible. And again, on an automated system. But can you imagine, and I've talked about this before, but I'll reiterate it, to that point of Tangle and blockchain and the utilization of Iota as a token on a system. You and I have fridges. We take something out of that fridge. It knows we've taken it out. And in that supply demand mechanism, all the way down the whole entire chain of ordering it, say from, I'm going to use Amazon example. Not everyone buys their food from Amazon, obviously, but let's say it does an automated order or a batch order to know when it's going to be most sustainable to do a full batch order of your week's shopping, for example, automated. Similar to like subscribe and save right now on Amazon, but this is going to be way more automated. But then think further ahead, the logistical element, the production element. Now, if it was a product, it'd be manufactured, it would be produced, the logistical element of delivery, transportation, whether it's plane, sea, or air, or I've got that wrong. There's probably another one, train, sea, and air. Yeah, no, I think I got that right. All those applications, supply and demand metrics, forecasting, trending, and the delivery of that all simultaneously, with the fact that we now could potentially have drone deliveries as well. But all of these points of detail are transactions. So it's not just me taking something out, consuming it, having another one purchased. It's every single bit of detail along that chain. And if you think about this agricultural aspect here, every transaction, again, harvesting, seeding is a transfer of an action. So it becomes magnificently huge when you think about it. This is just agriculture and a small part of agriculture as well. You can talk about transportation in general. You can talk about healthcare, medication. Machine learning, deep learning is very in an infant stage. What I mean by machine learning is drones learning for themselves how to do things, or indeed the AI or the software that's operating it will start learning to understand data from AI more and more, algorithms, metrics of environmental factors, you name it. The deep learning mechanism comes from analyzing things more. So, for example, in healthcare, image analysis of X-rays and MRIs to really start concluding genetically what's going on. Why is there so much more disease and cancer in the world? And started to operate and take that data, deep learning data, processing it faster with what we've got with quantum computing, blockchain for validation, processing, storage of that data. All of these things are transactions. So you can start to piece together what I'm talking about here. There's loads of drones now doing this agricultural piece. And this is only a day old, this article, but look at this. By the end of 2023, over 300,000 agricultural drones were used in 100 countries and regions worldwide. That's phenomenal. Can you imagine what that number would be at the end of 2024? And then all of a sudden, you're already talking about 300,000 minimum transactions or transfer of actions there, right? And they're operating all day, every day, potentially. Obviously, they're going to be charged and everything at some point. But give or take, let's even halve that. You start to see those 100-odd thousand transactions per second that a blockchain can offer starts getting eaten up very quickly. And even a transfer and action of data as it's working 24/7 is a transfer of action. Do you understand or start getting that in your minds now to understand that actually in the future I can see these price points going up in a lot of these blockchain assets because of this kind of dilemma, this kind of thought process. It's really fascinating. But as I said, I had the privilege of working in all these industries to start piecing it together. And that's when I found out about blockchain originally, to go understand how it's all going to work now. So keep an eye on this space, guys. It's really, really interesting. But on those topics of the price point, let's talk about that really quickly before I wrap this video up. The current price point of 15.6 cents is an absolute great bite point for me personally. I have been trying to trigger some purchases around the 14 odd cents that we saw a couple of months back, and we have recently come to some of those areas again in the last few weeks. It's quite an exciting aspect here, because previously the all-time high of Iota has been around the $2.60 mark. So there's plenty of growth to come yet, guys. And I remember from a previous video, we looked at that longer term fib level. There's a potential opportunity that we could get towards that $5 mark. That's a 2,000 odd % marker upright from relatively recent position price points. The RSIs on the bottom left here are showcasing 40 on the nose pretty much, which is a very good number for me personally when I look to DCA or a manual transaction of buying or accumulating more assets of a token. But in the long run, I've always been sitting there going, I wish we got back to 15 cents again, because when it rose up to here 40 cents, I thought, here we go. But I knew it would come down. I wasn't expecting it to come down this fast, but you got to imagine that trend line approach. So there is an argument potentially that we could retest these 13 odd cent marks again at some point. That would reflect quite nicely with the macro levels here that we saw in the previous videos that I've put these fib levels in. You can see them just about, and we did hit those numbers quite nicely on a few occasions. I don't just draw them for the sake of it. They do eventually come in. You can check the previous video. I haven't moved any of these around yet, but you can see that there is definitely a method in the madness to an extent. The indicators on the right hand side here are showing that we're still in that negative format for Iota. So I still think there's plenty of opportunity for DCAing around these relative areas between that 10 cent and 20 cent mark, because I think for the future we will look back at those numbers and laugh. But the principle being, whether this bull run does or doesn't come towards the end of this year and into 2025, I still think we could get to those numbers for sure if that cycle does come. But we must look 5, 10, 15 years ahead. We're at the very beginning stages still of a lot of these blockchain developments and technologies, guys. It's absolutely exciting to see what is to come. But those points on Iota really are mentioning here as we squeeze down is there is definitely opportunity at these areas. Don't rest on your laurels on that. Again, it's not financial advice to say, I'll be down there for a while. It could swing up either way absolutely quite quickly, like we saw back here when just a couple of news announcements back in December, it shot straight up to 37 quite quickly from 16 cents over a 2-3 day period. So it's definitely possible. But for me right now, every other day when I see these current price points around floating between 14 and 16, sometimes 17 cents, I do like to buy for sure. But let's see how this goes, guys. I'm interested to know what you're doing with Iota. Are you new to Iota? Have you ever heard of it before? If you haven't, as I said, go and check out those other videos. Hopefully you find these informative. Again, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and that like button. If you do so, enjoy them. But we will wrap that video up there. I'm super excited for the continuous development of Iota. We'll do an update next time on the phase development through the ECB. And we will go from there. And even the dogs say, I need to go now. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.